Welcome back to the Free Spirits podcast, where we explore the functional beverage space, changing how we socialize. I'm your host, Lars Miller, here as always with my co-host, David Gonzalez. And if you are enjoying the show, do us a favor, rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help listeners like you find these conversations. Today, we are joined by Paul Weaver, Director and Head of Cannabis at the Boston Beer Company, one of the few major beverage companies to go all in on THC drinks in Canada. Paul's experience spans Molson Coors, Cannabis growth, and is now leading the vision and innovation behind Boston Beer's cannabis drinks. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lars. Nice to see you. Hi, David.
Hey, thanks for coming on.
So, Paul, you've spent your career kind of at the crossroads of beverage and cannabis. First, you were at Molson Coors. Now you're a director of innovation at Cannabis Growth, and now building Boston Beer's cannabis division from scratch. What drew you into the cannabis beverage category, and how did your early days kind of shape your perspective now that you're at Boston Beer?
Well, yeah, thanks again for having me on. Everyone's journey to work in the cannabis industry is a little different. I started in the beer industry with Molson Coors, as you said, running product innovation and product development up here at the brewery in Canada. And there's just a process. There's a process of product development. There's a process of launching new products and innovating in beverage alcohol that I really enjoy. And I really like that structure and that sequence of how you create and launch new products. And so that's certainly how I started my career. I became a passionate cannabis advocate when I moved to Canada. I mean, I grew up in Arizona. I was a DARE graduate. Cannabis was very foreboding for me growing up, and I'd certainly had a kind of a change of heart having seen and witnessed the product firsthand here in Canada. So I became a medical cannabis user, and then I met the team at Cannabis Growth Corporation, and I left the beer industry and I joined the cannabis industry in 2017. 2017, yeah, a year before legalization here in Canada. And that was a good crash course on the industry. I learned a lot about cultivation. I learned a lot about different form factors of cannabis, and beverages at that time was still very, very early. Like, we barely knew how to emulsify a cannabis extract, much less how to make it taste good or how to deliver it in a consumer-friendly manner. So we learned a lot those first few years in the cannabis industry in 2018, 2019 on how to be professional cannabis beverage makers. In 2021, then I met Jim Koch, the founder and current CEO of Boston Beer Company. We hit it off, and we learned a lot about how we could put these two worlds together of kind of Boston Beer Company, one of the most revered craft brewers in the United States, and cannabis, which is, an adjacent and emerging category. And it's been really a pleasure to put those two worlds together, the kind of craft brewer entrepreneurialism with this exciting and emerging new option for drinkers. That's kind of my journey in a nutshell, is, starting first in beer, leaving for weed, getting my sea legs in cannabis, and then bringing it back together here at Boston Beer Company. And that's been a few years now.
Was there a specific moment when you kind of realized that cannabis drinks would be a game changer?
I mean, I think when you have your first one, I remember my first one. It was in a bit of a sterile lab environment because, again, I think we were just sipping on straight emulsion. But the effects of a cannabis beverage, both in terms of speed of onset and just the overall satisfaction with the experience, is great. And then as a beverage maker from my past, knowing how neutral the base of cannabis liquid can be and what that opens up in terms of possibilities. It's a far more neutral liquid to play with than ethanol. And so you can make a lot of great tasting beverages with cannabis inputs. And so it's a very exciting platform for innovation. And of course, as an evangelical cannabis person myself, it's a really, really great product too.
I would say it is pretty interesting to see too how both of these industries are now, at least in the US, starting to converge a bit, at least piggybacking off each other's infrastructure. I know Canada probably has a bit of a different distribution network than in the States. It's all state-run distribution. Is that right? Is it through liquor, or is it a completely different distribution system?
Well, here in Canada, we have provinces. And we have the metric system, and we have a heavy hand of government interactions. It's uniquely Canadian how cannabis is run here, but that's okay. It's still a unequivocally federally legal market, which for an R&D department like us is clean. It's nice and clean, allows us to do what we need to do and get our manufacturing expertise and our brands and our recipes done. But it's very different. How cannabis is facilitated in Canada, everything goes through the government as the intermediary, and then each province has kind of their different retail models, whether it's wholly owned government stores like in Quebec or private retailers like in Ontario, but it's still kind of delivered by the government. What you're seeing and alluding to, David, in America, though, is cannabis beverages are starting to be sold through liquor channels, which means beer trucks and liquor stores and the back braces and dollies of moving liquid, as it probably should. Because the one thing dispensaries are not set up for is large fridges and heavy logistics. A vape cart is about a gram and it's about this size. So the old school marijuana industry and the dispensary model was built for a certain type of product class, not necessarily beverages. And that's why what's happening in America with respect to hemp THC beverages being sold through the liquor channel is so exciting and so seamless.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to take a step back and go back to these kind of earlier days. I'm trying to imagine what that conversation is like. Obviously, starting in Molson Coors, making your way to Canopy. How did this conversation with Boston Beer Company even come about? When they saw, like, when you guys are sitting there having this first conversation, I'm trying to imagine myself, a publicly traded company saying, why don't we try out some THC drinks in Canada? Like, what were those conversations like? Did you pitch this? Did they come to you? How did you guys...
I think we kind of met in the middle. I think that's the easiest way to say it, because I certainly reached out to Boston Beer Company. This is a company that I think most people that have worked in beverage alcohol hold a high opinion of Boston Beer. Independently owned. It's a builder. It builds brands and it makes hits. Not just Sam Adams, Twisted Tea, Angry Orchard, Truly Hard Seltzer, Dogfish Head. These are like iconic brands that they've been built through the teams of Boston Beer. And so the idea of being a builder and building something from scratch was really what appealed to me. And so I reached out. I reached out to Dave Berwick, who was the CEO at the time, and he connected me with a few other people. And it turns out they had been researching and then kind of on academically what this opportunity looks like. And I think they were looking for someone to run that could do that in Canada. And here I happened to just kind of present myself to them. So I think it was just a serendipity how we found each other. But, I've really enjoyed, again, putting these two worlds together. And they've embraced cannabis culture from day one. So it's been a good fit.
Interesting. So it sounds like you guys were both kind of simultaneously connecting the dots, realizing like, okay, there's this kind of new burgeoning marketplace happening. Let's experiment. Is that kind of the best way to put this? The Canada market was, let's try out an experiment in this market that at least has the infrastructure to support this. Obviously, at the time, the US hemp market was not what it is today, but was that the goal? Let's just try launching a product in this new market and let's see what we can learn from this Canadian market.
I think we didn't have a clear vision of where the road would manifest in the United States. I don't think anyone really still does. We're starting to get a hint of it, but I don't think we really have a clear handle yet on how it's going to be paved. But again, Canada is federally legal, and it's certainly not without its flaws, but it's a unequivocally regulated market that has rules. So okay, let's do that. Let's use that as the R&D proving ground for, again, testing liquids, testing brands, and probably most importantly, understanding our manufacturing challenges, because every drink is a little different and manufacturing or brewing is a little different recipe to recipe. But Boston Beer Company has very smart people, very smart insights and research capabilities. And the writing is on the wall, like the next generation of drinker is drinking differently and they're starting to explore beyond alcohol. So we better get in front of this. This is not just a fad. This is a shift in consumer culture, a shift in consumer morality, a shift in active ingredient preference. So it's not just, culturally sound and fits with our values, but it's also just good business to make sure that we hedge our business against emerging threats, which are also opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great way to kind of frame it here. It's if the fundamental culture around drinking is experiencing some, I don't want to call it a new wave, but if there is a change in preference, people have more options. You want to meet the consumer where they are. One of the questions I had too was, you talked about Boston Beer being very research oriented, a lot of smart people, they're connecting these dots. Was there any pushback or aversion, any like somebody in the room saying, hey, this is super risky? Or was it pretty much like green light, go, like, hey, Paul, love this idea, like go for it?
Well, I mean, we're pretty detail oriented, and we have a lot of smart people also on our legal team that make sure that we are covered from an enterprise risk perspective, right? Because we're a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange. We are a 40-year-old beverage alcohol company. It's not like we're a startup MSO or a Canadian LP that, have just try it out. Like, we have a lot of skin in the game, and a lot of stuff to protect. So everything we do is heavily vetted through a legal and accounting lens. That you kind of, okay, let's assume, of course, that we can find a way to do it without creating any conflict. Then that culture fit. And I think that was my question, like, certainly there's going to be some pushback. And not really. I think this company is very much embracing it. One of the things, though, that I try and be mindful of, and I certainly preach this to my team, and anytime we address our U.S. colleagues. So let's say in the United States, 2/3 of people support legalizing recreational cannabis. And I think that's actually a conservative vote. Let's say it's 2/3. So if you're presenting to a room of people and there's three, you say, okay, David, look to your left, look to your right. One of you is probably not sure about it. And I think we just try and be honest and remind people that you're not alone. If you have hesitation about cannabis, like I try and cool it on pushing weed. I try not to be too evangelical. I find it's great. It'll find its own way with you. But a good reminder that, culturally we're over that super majority world, but that still doesn't mean there's not a minority of people who are concerned or minority people who have questions. And when you work for a company that has a couple thousand people, you have to acknowledge that. So I would say the general consensus and the overall leadership consensus is very supportive and very much loves what we're doing. But that does not to say that we can't ignore a silent minority that's just kind of freaked out by it. So I think we try and be a little bit self-aware about that, but I've been very pleased at the enthusiasm, the overwhelming enthusiasm of what we're doing.
So, launching Teapot and Emerald Hour, and you mentioned before, you've had to navigate a lot of regulatory and unknowns. What were some of the biggest surprises, good or bad, as you brought those drinks to the market in Canada? And then, were there any lessons on formulation based or compliance that, changed any of that?
Yeah, tons. Yeah, I would say we have two beverage brands that are cannabis focused that we're continuing to develop here in Canada. Our first and our flagship cannabis beverage brand is called Teapot, and Teapot is a line of non-carbonated THC infused iced teas, and it's modeled off our very successful Twisted Tea brand. And when you have a proven set of liquid and we tasted it with THC and it tasted awesome, and we had a name and that name was awesome and the branding was clicking, we actually feel like, I think we have something special here. And we've certainly learned a lot about how to talk about Teapot in a way that's easy to understand and kind of appealing to new drinkers. What we learned a lot about with Teapot is how to make it in a scaled manufacturing capacity, because it's not alcohol and it works very different than alcohol, and it requires different pasteurization protocols and different methods of preserving the product so it doesn't, because it doesn't have alcohol to kind of keep it sterile. Most of the learning for Teapot, I believe, is actually in the manufacturing side and a little bit of kind of who our drinker is and how to talk to them the right way. We originally started with Teapot as a 5 milligram only product line, but we've quickly expanded that into 10 milligrams. And now both are selling quite well independently of one another, which is interesting. They're not necessarily cannibalizing each other. So we've learned a little bit about formulation and marketing, but manufacturing and how to do that at scale certainly has been the most important tranche of learning for us.
Yeah. And how has consumer feedback in Canada shaped your roadmap for any future products thus far?
Yeah, certainly some recipes perform better than others. So we're learning kind of what flavor profiles work really well. We're learning a lot about who our drinker is. I think there's a certain over-index. So we can look at who's buying our product. We can look at who's engaging with us on social media to understand our kind of a target consumer. And we're actually leaning a lot more female than we originally anticipated, probably because a couple guys were running it to start. And now we're like, oh, okay. So the natural kind of consumer base for our product line is, a 25 to 45-year-old female that is mindful of their consumption and really likes our branding and really likes our variety of flavors and sugar and calorie levels. So I'm just knowing our drinker a little bit better, knowing which recipes work better, how to play with potency again. All these things are things you learn once you kind of launch the product and listen.
I want to go back to the original manufacturing discovery process. Because obviously, I think you guys have done partnerships, co-mans, as opposed to investing the CapEx and building in your own facilities in Canada. For a brand that has the notoriety that Boston Beer does, what goes into that evaluation process for trying to pick a co-man? And I think it was Entourage for inputs and Peak Processing for manufacturing. So what's that criteria look like for any manufacturers who might be listening, any co-mans? What's it like to be vetted by a company like Boston Beer?
It's exhaustive. And we try and preface any conversations with prospective co-packers with an apology in advance, but this is kind of what it means to do business with us. I would say it's just quality. It's quality first. Before we even get into pricing conversations, before we even get into capacity and the ability to kind of meet our scale, there is an exhaustive list of quality controls and checks to ensure that they're adhering to. I would say it's just as intense on the administrative side as it is on the physical side. Like how clean and how consistent and the equipment you have and the ability to manage, make that product to our very, very specific standards. That is like physical. But then how fastidious are you in managing your data and your records so that at any time we can go back and look at those records? So I think it starts with quality. I mean, that might sound generic, but it actually is. I've seen it firsthand. Like it's a 200 line item Excel spreadsheet that we'll give you a couple weeks to kind of play with, and then we'll take a look. And our co-manufacturer in Canada is called Peak Processing, and they've been great. Like quality first, and make sure that they can make our product to the scale and quality standards that we have, and work with us on process improvements as well. So it starts and ends with quality, and it's objective assessment of their quality control standards and capabilities.
Awesome. Yeah, I imagine there's probably a due diligence period that, I don't know, maybe lasts a month, maybe two, but diving very deep in the weeds, because obviously it's quality is one thing, but making sure chain of custody for every single input, all these things are obviously imperative on the admin
especially
side.
in hemp, right? Where you're like, show me where that hemp comes from. Well, that's stuff, that's stuff that we almost manage independently. Like I would say that, in Canada, you mentioned Entourage Health, which we actually don't have that partnership any longer with Entourage Health, but that allowed us to source and track our own inputs so that we can manage that independently. So we kind of go seed to can in terms of our ability to track everything down. And once we kind of get past that emulsion process, where you take the cannabis extract, you turn it into a liquid, it's pretty standard in terms of beverage processing. And that's where the Boston Beer quality machine really clicks on. It's like, okay, now we're in the brewery, like, we're really gonna get in your face.
Okay, I love it. Last question on that is, do you guys have any kind of volume thresholds where you say, like, all right, if we're at this capacity, if we scale to this point, maybe it does make sense to have a company or an entity like Boston Beer invest in that infrastructure and own it? Is that a conversation that you guys really have, or is it fine for now?
It's fine for now. We haven't set that line, and I don't anticipate us doing that anytime soon. One of the things that I've learned, I didn't realize this when I first joined Boston Beer, and I'm going to get this date wrong, but I think it communicates the point. Boston Beer Company was founded in 1984. I don't believe Jim Koch and Boston Beer Company owned a brewery until the mid-90s.
Wow. Okay.
And I think what that speaks to is our ability to leverage third-party logistics and tap into that, and only invest when it becomes so just so attractive financially and so idiot-proof to make that leap, because I'd rather maintain that flexibility. I think we're blessed right now as a cannabis department to be so flexible. We have not over-invested in any one manufacturer or one regulatory model. Unlike our peers in the brewery space, which chose a couple lanes, and now we're trying to kind of figure out how they claw themselves back. We are super flexible because we did not go the direct investment route. And I think that'll be the way we do it for a while.
So the cannabis beverage space in Canada is growing, but it's still pretty small compared to alcohol. Obviously, you mentioned earlier that the dispensary channel isn't always the ideal space for these drinks from an infrastructure standpoint. What's your read on the real consumer adoption so far? Like who's actually buying and rebuying both Teapot and Emerald Hour?
Well, in the dispensary channel, you're right, because in Canada, it's even worse than most U.S. states because the potency laws are so low and the marketing restrictions are so high. So in Canada, for example, edibles, and again, I'm going to get this stat wrong, but I think edibles only account for 7 or 8% of the whole industry. Unlike California, which might be only 15%, but it's still there. But drinks are the fastest growing segment of edibles. And that's because it's this perfect Venn diagram of cannabis consumers who probably should inhale less, and beverage alcohol consumers who maybe want to drink less alcohol. And it's really just about awareness and access and giving people the confidence to step into a dispensary, because most new cannabis consumers are still kind of freaked out going into dispensaries, and dispensary model is built on growing inhalation products like vapes and flower and pre-rolls. So what we're finding is pockets of growth among a wide variety of consumers, both old school cannabis smokers that are like, maybe I should give my lungs a break, and beverage alcohol drinkers who right next door, there's more dispensaries than there are liquor stores in Ontario. There's a dispensary right next door. And if we've finally done our marketing right, and we finally got through into your feed and we can finally talk with you, maybe we can convince you to just walk next door and pop into that dispensary. we have really good distribution. I think our goal is just make sure that we're just well distributed across the country so that when we do find that breakthrough moment of communication, any corner store dispensary you pop in and we're right there.
You mentioned that women, 25 to I believe 42, you said, were the main 45 were the main buyers, and that was a surprise at first. Have there been any other surprise audiences or usage occasions that you've learned?
Well, I mean, all this is indexing, right? So like this is just slightly over average. We still have like 25-year-old dudes and 35-year-old soccer moms and 65-year-old retirees, right? So I think it's that last group, that retiree group, that is one that I don't want to say surprising. It's just like I guess it's maybe surprising that we as an industry have yet to really lean in on it. Like you don't see anyone doing a pop-up at a retirement home, and they should be doing only retirement home pop-ups because it's just such a good buying power. They don't want to drink alcohol anymore. They're curious. They're fun. This is a great product for them. It's not intimidating. It doesn't smoke or smell. So I would say that's that other group. It's that kind of that boomer generation that is like just has so much enthusiasm for this type of product, and we're just so neglectful of them as a marketing demographic.
I have one more follow-up question here, but I want David to tell a quick story about his time in Palace and the big order he had to fill for retirement.
Sure. So Paul, I think what you said is very prescient. So when I was running a hemp retail store, we started noticing a lot of elderly people were coming in and asking about these products. And so that's kind of when the seed was planted, like, okay, this isn't college kids. This is older people who are needing help with pain relief, don't want to be on opioids, sitting in a retirement home, maybe need something to lift their spirits. We did a marketing campaign. We realized like, okay, they're probably not going to click on an Instagram ad, probably not going to open up an email. So we did a direct mail campaign where we just sent out flyers, and then we knew the routes for a bunch of homes were. And then one day we got an order that was like $2,000, and our average order value is normally like $75. And I was like, is this fraud? Is this real? So I tagged along with the driver. I was like, I want to make sure you're not getting set up for something bad here. And we pull up and it's a retirement home. And I was just like, is this the right address? And he's like, it's what it says. So we walked in, and the person at the front desk was like, oh, are you from Hemp House? Yeah, they're waiting for you out back. And we're like, okay. So we go back there. It's like I don't know if a conference room is the best way to put it, but like a little community area. And this lady just lights up and she's like, oh, like you're here. And so she like summons all her friends over. And it was literally like a mini distributor who was buying in bulk and then just giving it out to a bunch of her friends and other fellow retirees. And so I'll never forget that story, because I was like, wow, A, that's great customer lifetime value. But B, it's like the word of mouth and kind of the networking effect as people discover these products and they're realizing like, okay, I don't actually have to step foot in a dispensary. I don't need to smoke something. Like there are these other form factors that work well. And they're, to your point earlier, it's very accessible. It's a good way to kind of dip your toe in the water. So that story was one of my favorite ones from a past life. But it's always funny when I hear people talk about that segment, because it is very much underserved, because it is so difficult to market to them, but the demand is very, very real.
I have this is so good. It's so good. I think it's the direct to consumer stuff, it does happen in Canada. It's just so clunky logistically. It's just not convenient. And I think the convenience of beverage delivery has really improved, whether it's whale pod shippers or even just you're kind of going door to door. I have this like ad campaign in my head. One day I'm going to do it, I swear, where it's like, it's about get high with your dad or get high with your mom, just allow, create the tools to facilitate that. Like, I remember the first time I got high with my dad. I remember the first time I got high with my mom. And I think that's an experience that everyone should have. And it's, and a beverage is a great way to kind of do that. And, it's assuming everyone's in the right headspace and it's not going to pull back any layers that you don't want. It's a once in a lifetime moment. The first time you actually have a chance to consume some THC with a parent. And I think there's a whole rich marketing territory for that.
I love that. So kind of going back to the branding and everything with Teapot and Emerald Hour, have you noticed any brand loyalty forming, or is everyone kind of still just sampling Canada?
Well, I mean, certainly we have repeat buyers. I mean, we like to think that we're the best tasting cannabis beverage in the known universe, because we've spent so much time on it, and we really do compare a lot of products. So I do think we feel comfortable taking that Pepsi challenge and allowing people to try our product and come back. But I do think that it's one of the craft beer problems, right? Is there's just so much new stuff every day. How do you get loyalty for a shelf that is just always evolving, and it's very exciting and it's fun, and it's like, it's that they don't even want to not buy. It's just like, there's so much fun stuff. So I think it just puts the onus on innovation and making sure that you keep yourself fresh and that you're getting new products out the door, that you're always having something new, at least once a quarter, something new for them to try, because that's what they expect. So loyalty is always hard to find in a category that has so much fun innovation, and you just really have to stay in front of it and offer something new and something exciting to try. But we do have some loyal Teapot fans, and we're starting to get some Emerald Hours early new, but we're starting to get some loyal Emerald Hour fans as well. You just have to have the best tasting product and acknowledge the frequency of innovation, because it's just, if you don't, then even if you have the best tasting drink, it doesn't matter. It's just too much new shit to compete against. So
Absolutely.
Keeping it fresh, keeping new products, but like just being confident that you've got the best tasting liquid after everyone kind of goes full circle.
Yeah, I love that answer. I think one of the things that's especially tough, at least locally in the States, is that brand promiscuity. So kind of like you mentioned, there's so much new stuff. It's tough to go to a store where you see aisles full of new, tiny, colorful labels that have different dosages, different cannabinoid profiles, all this stuff. And so that brand equity piece gets especially challenging. But to your point, if you stay on top of that innovation, then you still are meeting that consumer where they're at. If they want to try other things, then you're meeting them there. And so I think one of the big burning questions that, I don't know, I'm personally curious about, I'm sure Lars and others listening are curious about here as well, is obviously looking at what's happening in the States. You guys have shown some incredible patience as far as diving into this hemp market. And I'm assuming that's very methodical and a very, obviously it's something that management and others are going to look at the risk profile of launching products like this in the US market. So how do you guys actually weigh the risks and opportunities for launching a hemp-derived THC drink in the US? What are those conversations like? Is risk quantifiable? Is it a gut thing? I guess, what would it take for you guys to move in confidence and say, all right, we can now look at this US market and start to take that plunge?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say that we have a clear calculus of this, and all of a sudden the algorithm is flipped, and now we're good to go. Like it's much more nuanced than that, and it's certainly one that's predicated on how our company is performing, how the market is performing, and what our customers are telling us. And by customer, I actually don't mean the drinker, because we actually sell to wholesalers and distributors. That's the way that the alcohol model works in the United States, right? We sell to a middle tier who then sells to the retailers. That's that 3-tier system. And more and more our distributors are participating in the category. More and more our wholesalers are wanting us to be leaders and thought leaders in this space, because it is still, there's a lot of riffraff in the hemp beverage category and a lot of new, well-intentioned, but very new companies. And they're looking for stability in our wholesalers, and our wholesalers want leaders that they can trust on, rely on, that are going to show up the product and not leave them high and dry. So I think, we feel that we've kind of secured pole position in this category, but it's still a very precarious regulatory market, both at the state level and more importantly at the federal level. So as we get comfortable with navigating that regulatory environment, we're going to continue to champion the category, be believers in it, try and be thought leaders where we can, until we believe the time is right. There's no specific moment that we're looking for. There's no specific calculus that'll flip it. We're also a company that is pretty resilient. We're builders, and we also are going through lots of transitions. We're cycling off some brands that are growing, some brands that are flattening, and we have a leadership change already. Founder Jim Cook is taking over as CEO again. So we have a lot going on as a company. This is one that is moved into a resource conversation. Are we doing this instead of what? And how are we managing our resources accordingly? So we listen to our wholesalers, though. I think that's the short answer is our customer, our wholesalers, we're trying to stay in line with them.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a good context for people listening. I think a lot of us are maybe under the impression that maybe it's, well, if the Farm Bill had more clarity, we could operate with a little bit more trust that this won't get rug pulled or something like that. But it sounds like it's more of a nuanced approach to deciding whether or not to take that plunge. And obviously, to your point, there's an opportunity cost for making that, if you are to make that plunge. So I guess, are there any, aside from like a macro political side, are there any things that you think you would like to see happen in the US market for you guys to have more confidence that this would be a good bet, that there would be a good allocation of resources? Is it regulatory change? Is it more and more distributors coming on? Like what are those? I guess if it's not a algorithm, what might the signals be?
There's certainly a lot of signals. The problem, I think, is that they're just signals, right? I think it'd be nice if there was some explicit federal acknowledgement of the category.
Yes.
It'd be nice if there was some pathway where we start to harmonize state regulations. But, I don't think we're naive to expect that will happen. There's a lot of other priorities in state and federal politics right now. So no, there's really nothing specific that we're looking for. We're just going to continue to follow the news and listen to our trade associations and make sure that we're on the front edge of all the news. And there's a window, and that window, we want to make sure that we capture that window, because if we wait too long, then the barbarians are at the gate. We are a large brewer, but we're not the largest brewer. And there's a lot of capital that can be deployed in this category to really muscle out a lot of players.
Yeah.
So when is our window? How do we capitalize on it? And how do we ensure that we don't do it at the wrong timing? These are all very nuanced, rhetorical questions, but they're things that we talk about every day.
So kind of looking at the future of the space, specifically in the United States, how are you guys, and you mentioned capital industry, how are you guys thinking about either, possibly making acquisitions, or if you just would rather speculate on the industry as a whole, not specific to Boston Beer, how do you think the future of collaboration in the space will go in the U.S.? Meaning, could we see more ties between big beer and cannabis operators? Is it big beverage and cannabis operators? What does that look like, in your opinion?
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, I'll tell you that on our side, historically, we're builders, we're not buyers. We built all the brands for the most part in our portfolio, and that is typically how we do things. But we're not ruling out any particular go-to-market model, but we don't really have anything to comment on with respect to speculation there with us. But I'm happy to speculate on other people. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of brands that are out there making a lot of revenue and a lot of market share now, and I think that they have a vision of acquisition. That's kind of why they're so extroverted and public with stating their volumes and stating their revenue. And I think they are very much trying to angle for a strategic acquisition, whether that's public or private acquisition, whether that's a large brewer or a large beverage company or just a large investment portfolio that might choose to make that investment. But it does seem like the larger brands in the space are making overtures to would-be investors. So I do think there's going to be a lot of activity in this space, particularly as the regulatory landscape starts to shift from light gray to dark gray, or dark gray to light gray, whatever you say, where it seems like we kind of have a handle on where the puck is going, that there might be some early acquisition work. But it's also, you got to take everything that's being said in the public space with a grain of salt, and making sure that these are statements being made with purpose to entice an investment. So there's a lot of great brands out there that are making a lot of great marketing decisions and great shelving decisions and claiming big sales. It seems like they're doing that for a purpose.
Yeah. What advice would you give other major beverage brands eyeing the space but are worried about the potential risk?
What advice would I give beverage alcohol companies?
Yeah, big beverage or big.
Don't worry about it, guys. Stay out of it. Don't touch it. It'll be fine. You're fine. Yeah, no, I mean, listen, every beverage alcohol company has their eye on this, and they know exactly what's up. Can they successfully curtail the growth of the category, or will they embrace what their wholesalers are doing? This is kind of the question. Do you try and fight the organic love that this category is growing, or do you just embrace it? I would probably suggest you embrace it. And don't fight the current, and just find a way to go with it. But in terms of actual advice, every company has their own go-to-market models and kind of what their KPIs are. But I would say, if you're trying to fight what your drinkers are doing, then you maybe are not on the right side of history there. So maybe just listen to your customers, the wholesalers, and watch what your drinkers are doing and try and get from that.
That's good advice. So last question for you, Paul. I want to change gears a bit and take you off the hot seat on the U.S. market.
It's okay.
Things I wanted to ask you about too is obviously Boston Beer has a reputation for putting the drinker first, whether if it's craft beer, THC, iced teas. And I'm just curious for you as an innovator, somebody who's coming in and building up a net new business function for a company. How do you go about actually approaching naming, design, building trust in a category where it is so new for consumers? What's it actually like to take this idea from 0 to 1?
Well, every brand and product line is different, right? And in terms of what you're trying to achieve with it. Sometimes like naming, for example, like when you know, like we had a million names for our iced tea before someone said Teapot. We're like, well, obviously we should just call it Teapot. Done. I don't even think we had to debate it. It was like, yep, round room. That's a perfect name. So I do think that naming is one thing that I think we get too hung up on. And I think we've exhausted every weed pun. As a brand, there's a weed pun. I think we've done them all. So I think that the weed pun narrative, I think we've exhausted them all. And I think that what we realized that name almost doesn't really even matter anymore. It's really the ability to stand out in shelf as one thing that we're looking at right now. There's a couple really awesome images we have that we use every day that are of fridges or shelf sets of THC or THC beverages. And you say, okay, this mosaic, can we pop from this? So once you have your kind of packaging done, let's render it up and put it in this environment and say, does it pop? Because to our earlier point on promiscuity, like a lot of new stuff there, a lot of shiny objects, a lot of new shaping cans, but can you brand block and muscle in enough shelf space with something that's iconic that pops? So I think it's less important about the name and it is about your ability to kind of scream from the shelf and just distract you. But this is so just cliche, but like, you just got to taste good. You just like, don't neglect the taste. That's all that really, really, really matters. Like we're drink makers, make a good tasting drink. The branding is there to make sure that people see you. If they try you, they like you, they're going to come back. And if they're bored and they want to try something else, at least you've done your job and had more innovation for them to try. So I think just like, it's less about branding and more about liquid, particularly in cannabis where you don't have the luxury of big advertising budgets. You don't have the luxury of TV ads. Your product just has to speak for itself. So we have our tagline for this is we try and just be undeniably dope. If you're undeniably dope, if your liquid is undeniably dope, then hopefully the rest will solve itself.
I love that. Yeah. So it's not about having the biggest marketing budget, not about having maybe the best emulsion. It's really about having a consistent flavor forward beverage and a very well laid out planogram so that you just pop on that shelf.
Yeah. I mean, all that you said is like table stakes. It's like, well, you still have to have a good emulsion. You still have to have a good marketing budget. You still have to have all that is like assuming that you have comparable like industry standard emphasis on those things. Then what's going to stand out? I would say it's shelf, your ability to stand out on shelf and whatever your name is called, and your ability to just win over the final sip test.
I love that. All right, Lars, take us out.
Paul, thanks so much for sharing your journey and giving us an inside look on what it takes to build a cannabis beverage brand. To our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please do take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your podcast. It really does help us grow. And thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Cheers.